Hello and welcome to this edition of the Halcyon Show. My name is Lorne Risley and I'm going to be your host for this episode. KFC are my favourite fast food franchise in terms of the food that they produce and in terms of their mascot. Props to the Colonel, one love. A few years ago they trialled the idea of delivering to people's houses and I instantly thought, oh yay, I can get smashed and fat on a weekly basis going forward. And then I searched to see where it would be delivered to and my house wasn't on it. But it said that they would be updating their available distances over the course of time. That was 5 years ago. And here I sit, somewhat morbidly obese, but nowhere near as much if KFC had delivered to my house. It's a new concept meshed with an old idea that could have been great if it had just been executed properly. And that story in no way ties into the game that I'm reviewing today, Cosmo Chaser. In no way, shape or form.
But he didn't say anything!
I mean, just to tie myself into this, in terms of bad ideas executed poorly, just imagine if someone just decided one day to continue to call themselves the king, nay, the emperor of YouTube without any rhyme, reason, evidence, or indeed any provocation for doing so. Wouldn't that be just the least funny joke of all time? But anyway, we're not talking about me, we're talking about Cosmo Chaser. And again, as you've come to expect on these reviews by now, if you'll permit me to refer to my famous notes. In a cylindrically molded 2D space, you have to defeat unlimited waves of enemy space drones and protect passengers of interstellar cruiser. Uniquely designed 14 enemy drones shows different tactical maneuver and attack. Drone attacks will fill the screen with storm of bullets, not a storm, almost gave it credit there. But you can always dodge them and win the battle because there's no dead-end corner in this game. You'll find versatile joy of fixed direction shooting action in Cosmo Chaser. The features include classic arcade-style massive enemy shooting battle, zero delay respawn after players destroy. It's like this is trying to annoy me at this point. Unique 360-degree auto-aiming dual system at boss stage. We'll get into why I don't know if that's true in a moment. Cruise ship defense mission at same time of enemy fight. Oh my, I can't take anymore. So, the idea of this game is that you fly circles around a giant spacefaring dildo, destroying things in a Galaga clone type game. Here's the thing you need to know about this game right from the get-go. It's broken. It is broken. Very well designed, but broken. To give you an idea, I couldn't get past the first level. It just wasn't possible. 3 very critical things happened during the course of the game that prevented me from ever progressing further. Number 1, the fire mechanic. Like any good shooter, you just click the thing and it shoots. Now, I don't mind if you want to have rapid fire. I don't mind if you want to have single fire. I don't mind if you want to have a cooldown that amalgamates both these things from going from rapid fire to slow fire. Whatever you want, just let me know what it is and I'll adapt accordingly. This game has the biggest problem because I don't think it knows which it is. You start off every single level by being ejected from the dildo, cruiser, and every time you start off the game, there's a noticeable lack of enemies from the get-go. So you have to kind of cruise around to find them without going too far up the cruiser, because you don't want to work the shaft too early in the experience because you've got to make this last an hour. It's our first day, of course.
Giggity giggity. Giggity goo. Stick around.
You then come across the enemies in to a certain degree, 4s, 5s, sometimes larger groups. You press the fire button and you just spaff it all everywhere. It just, and then it stops. And you go, okay, well maybe there's a cooldown mechanic. So you click it again. Then you click it again and again and again. And nothing happens. You've got no indication as to whether or not it's the cooldown mechanic, if it's something that's broken, because I'll admit, my laptop is not the best at playing games. I'll get into why that's relevant to this game in a moment, but I thought it's just the mouse pad. Okay, fine, not a big deal, that's what I've got a mouse for, so I can sweep it over so it's more sensitive, the click controls are more sensitive. Overall, it's just a more easy experience to play games that need a mouse with a mouse. Okay, fine, I've got no problems with doing that. Same problem, same issue, spaffing all of your projectiles in one hit and then having nothing to show for it at the end. Now, sometimes the games will let you shoot just one single blast. Okay, that's fine. I can adapt to that if that's what you want me to do. But there are periods where the game will not let you fire. And the worst thing is that there's no cooldown meter. There's nothing to indicate to you what you're doing to prevent yourself from firing. Which means that as you circle this giant spacefaring dildo, as I'm going to continue referencing it as because it really, really is, you continuously come across enemies that you can't destroy. You get killed in one hit. One hit, and you have no recourse with which to defend yourself. No shields, no maneuverability mechanics beyond just moving left and right, with swarms of enemies firing at you. There's just no way of avoiding being killed. Which brings me on to the second issue with this game. The most infuriating thing beyond the last one. So when you die, as you invariably will on the first level, because there's no way of you being able to, I don't know, destroy the enemies, which is kind of the point of the game, aside from rescuing people. We'll get to that in a moment. You respawn. And you respawn from the same point on the ship. Here's the problem with that little nugget. That point at the ship, by the second time that you've died, is swarming with enemies. And I mean swarming, at least 10, maybe 15 enemies at any one point. And they all hover over the same point that you respawn from. Every single time, which means that once you respawn, unless you're in one of those really unique scenarios where they happen to be looping around the respawn area, you'll be taken out before you've even started the game twice, and you only have 3 lives in each gaming session.
Stop! He's already dead!
Only 3. One you lose because you can't return fire, the second one because you get killed from coming out by respawning, and then the third one most likely in that scenario as well, or maybe a combination of the two. The final one, and this is the most annoying one of them all, is that no matter what I did to try and improve the speed of the game, no matter what I did, I cranked down the quality, I sped up my PC power, I changed my mouse, I did everything I could feasibly think of to improve the quality of this game. And it continuously lagged. The lag on this game is so ridiculously bad, to the point where even if you can respawn, and even if you can get off a few shots, the way that the game just stutters and sputters on a constant basis means that even if you can get those first 2 things going, you're still going to die. Okay, I am calm. I am calm. Let's get the review back on track, shall we? So let's refer to a few other things that's important to note about this game. The game attempts, in effect, to be a retro-style game with a new style feel. The graphics, for instance, and the soundtrack to a degree have a new feel to them. It's a 3D venture, which means that, aesthetically at least, it's very, very cool. I do like the ability to be able to have effectively a perpetually moving background. The one I'd link it to is Pulsar, mainly because it's the same kind of idea, which is that you can have perpetual motion. You never, ever, ever need a large, grandiose map, except for vertically in this game, because you're just constantly moving in the same direction or the reverse direction, so there's never the need for it. I actually kind of like that because it means that the focus is placed on the gameplay to a certain degree rather than necessarily fuddy-duddying over the background. But in this game, the developer, to their credit, has put a lot of time and effort into designing the ship, designing the ships, designing the background, and indeed the warp mechanics. They're nice touches to a game that looks, on the face of it, actually really entertaining. And despite my better judgment, I kind of like the soundtrack. The menu music differs from the music in the game, which has a variety of different tracks that you can use. All of them though seem to pertain to the trance genre, so if you're an ecstasy fiend, you're gonna love yourself some of this game. The interface of the game is actually pretty good. The idea that the menu's basic as balls, but we'll get into... Actually, no, let's touch on something very, very quickly now. The menu, once you get into the option screen, is weird. Everything is minuses instead of pluses and minuses. So the idea is that you minus away your distance from the screen in game so you can see more of the map or the dildo ship. You can also change the music volume, but again, it's negatives. It's a weird design choice, but nothing that certainly breaks the game. But in terms of the interface, you've got the ship on the top right-hand corner of your screen, which not only shows you where you are, but it also shows you how much of the ship you can see, and it shows you where your enemies and objectives are on the screen. On the top left-hand corner, you have basically a tracker of your progress, so how many ships you've destroyed or what your player score is, your rescue mechanic, because of course the game is centered around the idea that this ship is a sort of an arc of some kind. I'm sure they're not nicking this idea from Mass Effect Andromeda, a game renowned for its stability, by the way.
That, sir, is an investigated fabrication.
But you also have that score as well. Those two things amalgamate into what effect amounts to your player score. It also tells you what level or area you're on. Again, I only ever saw area 1 because I couldn't get past it. However, the most confusing thing is that in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, you have a ship UI or ship GUI. Here's the problem with that. You die in one hit. So what's the point in having it there? It doesn't indicate anything to do with your cooldown, it doesn't indicate anything to do with your lives because there's no number over it, and it doesn't indicate any damage you're receiving because you die in one hit. So what's it doing there? I got no idea. I mean, again, it looks cool, but it serves literally no purpose. And again, I just have to touch on this, the design choice, this one last thing. Why is the ship designed like a giant dildo? I'm trying to get my head around it because all I keep thinking of when I saw this is a joke I thought of once that wouldn't it be funny if NASA went into... In fact, instead of me just explaining it, here's the joke.
Houston, we have penetration.
God damn it, Johnson, how many times do I have to keep telling you this isn't funny anymore?
Now, let's touch on something else that the developer seems to have a real passion for. The narrative of the story, the reason why you're playing and the reason for the nature of the game. So, the game comes with a fairly extensive press kit. Located in the press kit is the game's story, which a detailed synopsis is presented to you at the beginning of the game in the form of Star Wars text, which, as is customary for spacefaring games, I suppose is not the worst thing to have in your game. So let's delve in, shall we? Game story. In 2140, Sorry, I feel that this needs a slightly more robust voice. So. In 2140, humans completed the interplanetary hyperspace navigation technology and began to open Alpha Centauri AF. Vadia as a colonial planet, survival and habitation of the planet was successful and have resulted in permanent residence. United government, a federal government of 193 countries, announced that the Vastia could not be owned by any organization on the planet and that the federal... Oh, do you know what? Again, I've got to quit this. It factors nothing into the story. Factors nothing into the game at all. Nothing. Nada. Zip. The only reason why this is relevant is because it references at some stage the spacefaring ship encounters an alien or enemy force that wants to kidnap people. That's it. I just told you in one sentence what this press junket tells you in 4 paragraphs. That's not including the rest of the... There's a ton of exposition in this. The reason I touch on this is simple. The only other thing that I kind of derive from this game, apart from, again, the retro to new feel, the idea that it's packed with detail but hasn't been focused on from a gameplay perspective, which a criticism that I would level at some games, but this game in particular because they've clearly not tested it all that thoroughly in terms of the gameplay mechanics. They've gone over and above to try and make the thing cool, but without making it fun. This this story is another example of that. I'm sure that in an RPG game, or a narrative-based experience, or with some kind of main character to root for in the midst of this story who pilots the ship, or with some kind of cutscene mechanic that has you introduced to the game slowly and effectively over time without bombarding us with literally a book's worth of exposition, this story might have worked well. Clearly the person has poured over what they want in terms of the enemies, the names, the history, the timeline here. That's all great. The problem is that I don't care, because none of it factors in at all. And speaking as someone that spends way too long talking about things and can summarize things in one sentence, that's the reason for the epic looks, because let's face it, a lot of my reviews could be boiled down to a 10-second relay to you, the audience.
Doesn't anyone notice this? I feel like I'm taking crazy pills!
I know when exposition is too much. And this exposition is far, far too much. But let's talk about another thing that the game potentially does quite well, the power-ups. On the ship, as you navigate from left to right, up and down, there are entry ports. And they're actually designed in a way that makes them reasonably easy to see, and you can see when there's a power-up available to you. The three that I've experienced so far are a shield mechanic, which I don't know if it actually works, because when I picked up the shield mechanic I still died reasonably quickly, but it might work, who knows. You've got a kind of a projectile beam. I want to call it that. It basically, you shoot your normal projectiles through the middle, and then these green projectiles left and right, which again serves to maybe thin out the herd a little bit. Although, because they're projectiles, they're not particularly effective, because once you can't click it anymore, you can't shoot projectiles anymore as a whole. So what's the point in having the other two? Doesn't make sense, because that mechanic, as we've discussed, is broken. The one I do like though, the one I really, really like, is a mechanic where two balls on a giant dildo fire two large projectile beams that are constant streams of power. This one feels cool. This one feels powerful. This one feels like it could actually turn the tide of a battle. And also it negates the need for the firing mechanic, because you only have to press it once and it fires perpetually. Only downside with all of these mechanics is, number one, you don't get an idea of what it's going to be necessarily until you actually go to pick it up. I can't tell if one negates another, so if you have one equipped at the moment, I can't tell whether or not you'll be able to pick up another one without it negating the effects of the first ones, such as in Doom Tank, for instance, where you pick up one and it negates the use of the one that you picked up, which is fine, because that one at least has the cooldown mechanic. It tells you how much longer you've got, so you can decide whether or not you want to sacrifice the pickup that you've got, say the rockets on Doom Tank, for the flamethrower, which is less effective. In this game, que nada. You're just going to have to gauge it yourself, which is a bit frustrating at times, considering that you really want that beam mechanic to last for as long as it possibly can. And again, I'm going to have to talk about this because the game states that it presents it, and I'm sure there's going to be someone that manages to get past this first level through having a much more powerful PC, or is able to get past some of the bugs, or maybe they'll patch them at a later date. I can see from the news updates on Steam that the developer has taken a very active role at patching the game. Unfortunately, at the time of this review, that's not happened, so I can't judge it on merits that it later retains. I can only judge the game based on it as it stands right now. But the look of the game is striking initially, considering that I came from I came from Power Gunner to this, which means that I went from a very cartoony, overtly childlike aesthetic to this kind of aesthetic, which is much more realistic and indeed 3D rendered, so it's not the most detailed in the world, but it certainly looks impressive. In the ship, despite looking like a massive phallic object flying through space, it does have its details, like the multiple platforms within the ship, the glass panels, the lighting effects, again, the strobing effects in the background, the hyperspeed that the ship occasionally undergoes. It's all very nice. It all looks very good. The ship mechanics, they move reasonably well when the game's frame rate isn't dropping to 2 per minute or whatever it is. And I will say that the soundtrack does add a lot to this game. I can't say that when it all works and when it's all amalgamated, that there isn't a good game nestled in and amongst all the crap here. It's just that, are you really prepared to wade through all of this crap to get to what is effectively just a very simple shooter game?
Hey, I doubt it!
Okay.
So in summary, this game has a lot of promise, and I think that the developer, if this is their first attempt, and it's difficult for me to say, if they can somehow find a way to integrate the exposition that they've designed in very great detail into the game in a more meaningful way, great. If they can find a way to make the power-ups a more permanent option, or indeed a more varied option, or something that you can collect, aspects of your ship that you can use to upgrade and continuously keep, that would be great. If there's a way of making the spaceship less dildo-shaped, then I'd have one less thing to talk about in this video, which would probably be a bad thing, so no, keep that, it's fine. It's fine. Okay, it's not fine, I can't stop thinking about it, but still, if you can fix the AI so they're not going to swarm over the one place on the ship you're supposed to be safe, if you can fix the shooting mechanics, if you can make the game just a bit more varied in its gameplay other than just swooping from left to right, then you might have a really fun experience here, because the basis that you've already built in terms of the aesthetics would carry over into a second game very, very easily. But as it stands at the moment, this game is just one that has a lot of promise, but it's just completely undercut by a lot of the technical issues that I imagine have arisen as a result of focusing on the wrong elements of this game. And if I'm going to make recommendations, I would 100% recommend Pulsar or Power Gunner over this game for two very, very specific reasons. Number one, both of those games work as intended. Both of those games have a level of progression that this game has so far yet to demonstrate positively, albeit I imagine, again, there are levels and bosses, and great. If I can't get to them because your game is so poorly designed, I can't give you credit for how well those function. I would also recommend it because this game is around $2 to $4. But obviously there's going to be sales and things of that nature. So it's not the most expensive game in the world. But again, when you consider that Pulsar and Power Gunner are both spacefaring games, shooters, with unique takes on already well-established genres like this one tries to be, but they're both less than they're either a buck or less than a buck. I think they're about 79 pence in the UK, so maybe a buck and a half. They're significantly cheaper. So I fail to see why you would pick this game over those ones, just because of the level of exposition, the detail of the graphics, and the gameplay, because of those three things, one of them lets the side down completely, and it's the reason you bought the thing in the first place, to be a game. It's a great exposition, and I imagine in demos and things like that where the developer can render the bosses and all the rest of that sort of jazz, this game would look tremendous. I've got no illusions about that fact. And again, I can tell that the developer has put a lot of time and effort into this game as a whole. The problem is that it just looks like there's a few too many drop balls in some very, very key areas that mean for me as a gamer, I had to pick up and play this game 3 or 4 times. In my reviews, I often take 1 or 2 attempts to get real grips with the game, and then the third attempt to really get into it and then form the basis of my opinion. And I'll play it for an extended period of time, try and complete it. If I can't, then I'll get as much of the game as I can for you guys, for your guys' consideration. However, on this occasion, it took me, like I say, 3 or 4 times to really try and get into this game because of the mechanics. I thought it was me constantly. I thought it was my PC. I thought it was my mouse pad. I thought it was my mouse. I thought it was the way the graphics were set up or the game's configuration, but it isn't. It's this game. It's just not very well made in the manner that it needs to be. And on that basis, it's incredibly hard to recommend. Except for to people who are ecstasy addicts, because number one, they've got the money to be able to afford this kind of game, and they will love that soundtrack. Let's, as they say in Ibiza, have it!
You make the Lord very nervous.
Oh God, what have I done? I feel so dirty. I feel so wrong. So very, very wrong. A couple of details just to finish off the review that I should have mentioned at the beginning, because I just got too wrapped up in this. The developer is Choi Jaewook, and this game has been out since the 26th of June this year, so the chances are it's going to go on sale at some point. So here's the thing, if you feel like checking it out because you need something that looks a little bit more visually stimulating than other games that indie developers produce where they're using 16-bit graphics or very low resolution graphics, then fair enough. I would recommend this once the developer has had a chance to patch a lot of these issues and improve the gameplay significantly. But until then, this one's a very hard one to recommend. So what do you think? Cosmo Chaser, have you played it? It's been out for about 3 weeks. Let me know what your thoughts are in the description below. Indeed, let me know about any other 2D shooters, spacefaring shooters that you've played recently that you think surpass this game or don't surpass this game. Maybe there's a worse one out there. Maybe there's one I need to look at there to really give that one a kicking. Who knows? Let me know what your thoughts are in the description below. In the meantime though, thank you very much for watching this edition of The Halcyon Show. Please like, share and subscribe. Check out some of the other content creators in the description below, including the Nutty Ninja. I've seen him do some gameplay segments recently. GFY, he's back in the game, son. My boy Crow, he's still producing a lot of playthrough content. And indeed Defunct Games, where you'll see me over there deciding some shit from time to time. It's good fun, and I'd highly recommend you go check out and support what he's doing over there. In the meantime though, I would also hope that you check out some of the other content that I'm producing. I'm going to try and aim to do 2 videos a week. I did 4 last week. 4 of the sons of bitches. I've been working like a mofo and getting paid nothing. But nevertheless, do it for the love of the craft, love these games, well, love reviewing them, and I hope that you enjoy the content as it continues to come thoroughly and thickly and fastly over the coming weeks and months. So thank you very much again for watching. I've been your host, Lon Risley. Feel free to follow me on Twitter. And as always, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next episode of The Halcyon Show.